Okay.
No subject beyond the review.
Right.
All of life's minor trivial problems.
Very
I didn't realise. Yeah, but there was that one was blasting out heat instead of cold.
Oh.
And the headline tomorrow will read, "Out with the old and in with the new."
Are you writing the headlines now?
Very good. No, I'm not. Now, one comes back and two leave. We've got a
quorum?
We've got a quorum though. I think we might kick off, eh? Councillors. Okay, so we've now snuck through to item 10, proposed schedule of council meetings, which is there in front of you and pretty straightforward. Any questions, I guess, or any suggested alterations that clash with other activities that haven't been considered here, perhaps? I don't know. I mean, we've got to put a line in the sand about the dates and go from there.
I think it's really excellent, and from my perspective, it gets in front of everybody else, and I'll put all these dates into my diary, and then work around that, the other things, which I wasn't able to do up till the end of this year. So I thought it was really good, and if we could add things like the Wire Revisit in, just if you've got anything else that you want to do, let's get it in as soon as possible, so that it takes priority over other things that we're doing.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments on the timelines there, Councillor Bevan?
Yeah, this is just a personal thing. I've got commitments with the pit feed industry that will take me offshore for the first half of February, so I'm going to miss all of those meetings. And likewise, towards the end of November, there's a council meeting I just can't get to. But I don't know what you want to do about where we've got, conflicts that are pre-commitments.
How we've dealt with that in the past, and it seems to work okay, is if you can just let your colleagues know, ask for a leave of absence or something at the meeting previous, and then it's clear what's happening. Obviously, some days you get caught short for whatever reason and can't make it, and that's when an apology comes in, but it's pretty straightforward, really. Councillor Barker, you do hand it?
A couple of things. Just a first techno-geek thing. Can these be sent to us electronically so they just populate your diary automatically? That would save me going and keying them all in. That'd be great. Secondly, I'd like to see us put aside a day sometime in February, if that's possible, or March. We can continue to have that, like carry on from the strategy session we had. So I thought there was a lot of good stuff there. I thought we could do really well. So I'd like to have another addition in there if we could. February, March would suit well.
Well, take those comments on board and come back with some suggestions. Well, not.
Yeah,
Chief
just
Executive.
simply see that now's the time to put it on the table.
Councillor Hewitt.
Just in terms of pre-planning as well, and I see there are some days when we're going to be expected to be sitting through hearings and that sort of thing. The earlier the notice is in here, the better. So I'd just like to reiterate this too. That's it's really helpful having the year plan.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, a couple of matters. We did consider trying to set some dates potentially for hearings around the special consultative process for the Ruatana for water storage, but we're just at the moment too vague around dates. It probably wasn't actually very helpful to do that, but as soon as we can get a reasonable amount of certainty, we'll signal that to everybody. Just the other point I wish to raise is that with the potential visit and get-together of all councillors on the 12th of February via a trip to the port, that's also the date that Environment and Services Committee is scheduled. I note that the 5th of February is potentially a workshop or annual plan workshop day, and wondering if you wanted to make some adjustments there, or if you were happy that we try and keep the Environment and Services agenda down to just the morning.
Well, there's no reason why the visit couldn't commence at 3 o'clock.
Okay, that's fine.
If you've got all councillors around the region going to the port or invited to go to the port, would that not be an opportune time for them to come back here for a couple of hours afterwards if they want to talk about Ruataniwha?
All of that. The main priority, talking to Chris Bain at the port, was just when do you start to get busy? I've got this as an opportunity for the councils of the Bay. I think it's important. Come back with a date, and that's the date that suits them. So that's where that's come from. Councillor Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to populate a few more field trips and things in there. Is it possible within that year to make a visit to Taranaki to have a look at issues around oil and dairying? It's one province that actually has far more experience of us in both of those, and if we're going to be discussing these issues, it would be very good to see them at first hand.
Could I add to that?
Yeah, yes.
Could I add to that? If we're going to go to Taranaki, which I support, but I support the idea of looking at the oil and gas, I'd also like us to have a look at their riparian margin work. I've seen it from another perspective, and I think they're simply outstanding. And I think we could learn a lot from them. They are incredibly ambitious, and they've covered an enormous amount of ground.
There is some, from a council end, gaps in March, perhaps, potentially. But I think you're right. And I think actually on the way, a quick stop at Horizons to talk about the management of perhaps the Manawatu River, which has been a front and centre discussion in New Zealand the last couple of years, so would be useful. Plus you get to see that there are others around doing the same stuff. So.
Well, you can add to all of that. You can stop off and look at what they're doing in terms of managing hillsides, retiring land, all this sorts of big issues in there. Things that we are touching on, not to some extent, but a lot of work in there.
Okay, and you had another...
If you are going to visit Horizons, obviously a session with them on how they're going to implement the One Plan and the impact it will have on their primary industry would be really helpful again for us.
Okay, so there's some opportunities there and desire, obviously. So let's see if we can work. Yeah.
I support that visit to Taranaki as well. I just would like everyone to agree on a date now, if we could.
With them.
Can we perhaps, to move this on, adopt this and then ASAP any other opportunities, dates, get populated, whether it's just holding a couple of days that may or may not be used, that's fine.
Could I just raise one issue there? On the 5th of February, the workshop for the annual plan workshop, that's when the papers will be going out. The meeting ideally should be the following Tuesday the 11th. That's the workshop for the annual plan.
So the workshop should shift to the 11th.
So it should shift to the 11th because that first week of February is when the papers will be going out.
Okay. To the 11th.
If councillors are happy with that, I'd appreciate it. Yeah.
I'd be very happy if it moved back another week as well, because then I could attend it more forward and no back. I'm the first up to on
Oh, okay.
We all have clashes. I mean, you know, and there'll be other opportunities throughout to as we work in towards the draft annual plan. You've got the corporate strategic meeting, which will cover some of that. Yes.
Okay.
The annual plan workshop to the 11th, Mr. Drury suggested that would fit better. And perhaps tentative 18-19 March for a field trip to Taranaki. 18-19. Just because from a council end there seems to be a gap there which we could use. So. That might be beyond us, Mr. Mohi.
Did I hear you say you're going to rename it? Yeah.
Nicky Day.
Okay. Any other additions, etc.? Someone happy to move that be our base anyway to kick the. Yeah. At this stage, and there'll be other discussion, additions, etc. on the way through. Including at times perhaps juggling some of these dates, but at least you've got a starting point. So you're happy to move, Councillor Scott. Councillor Graham, you happy to second that? No further discussion? All I'd say in summing up is just keep in touch with the Chief Executive if there are opportunities, field days. I mean, some of the field days aren't run by us but need to be put in there because they are useful to attend if you do have time. Other organisations, etc. So, moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Right, where are we getting to now? Item 12. Annual Plan Progress Report. Would you like to lead us off there, Mr.
Yeah, thank
Drury?
you, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask Mr. Collins to come up and he'll be presenting parts of this report. What I've done for this annual plan progress report is the first progress report. It's for the first 4 months. I've put an introduction, clarification of financial reporting in there. It's a couple of sheets or 1.5 sheets. This is probably just a one-ser to try and sort of give you a bit of a lead-in for those councillors that are faced with this report for the first time. Local body reporting is a little bit different from commercial reporting. So what I've done there is I've just put a guide. I've said this report is made up of 2 parts. There's the financial report and then there's the non-financial part of it. The non-financial, I'll cover that quickly. Key performance indicators, I think you're all aware of key performance indicators. They're in Council's annual plan, 13-14, out to the public for consultation. And we report on those key performance indicators on a quarterly basis back to Council, and most of the group managers are here to pick up the questions. Now, Part 2 will be taking at the end of this, and it's Appendix 2 to this report. But the financial report in Part 1 is sort of goes on and on a bit. It's 4 sections. Section A is the commentary on the financial position, which includes your operating statement and balance sheet. So there's just some brief comments there just to let you know where we are at the end of the 4 months and whether we're satisfied with that and comment on some of the variations. Section B, we get into the operating statement. So you've got a summary operating statement and detailed operating statement and some quite detailed work there, which I'll come back to that in a minute. So Section B is your operating statements. Section C involves your balance sheet and loans and reserve balances, so that's another chunk of work we chat about. And Section D is the capital program, and a lot of that's quite self-explanatory. Section B is probably the more difficult one to understand. It looks a little bit different to commercial reporting. So we have, by way of background, we have 120 projects and 25 cost centres, and managers are responsible for running their projects. And in Section B, we've got individual project income and expenditure. Every project's given there. It's a lot of detail. The detail's given for those councillors that would like to look at a specific project and the progress against the revenue and and expenditure budgets for a specific project. Okay, and this is the only time you see that is in the full reporting. So those managers look after the 120 projects. For the purposes of our operating statement, we roll that up into what we call groups of activities. So for the purposes of commenting about variances, we talk about the whole lot of projects that cover the flood and drainage, or the whole lot of projects that cover governance. So we've got 7 categories there that we drill down to. So the operating statement does show a deficit of 846,000. That was in the annual plan, and that's what was planned for. You may think the 846 is high. It is. That's because there's 633 carried forward from the previous year. So if you take that out, the deficit, core deficit's just over 200,000, and that came in quite late in the piece when we looked at our rates, or the level of rates. So so that's the background. So I think now, unless you've got any questions there, we'll pick up on...
Just one question. So does that deficit, did that budget include the 600 that you're bringing forward?
The 846,000 deficit.
The budget included that.
It includes the 633 carried
okay.
forward. Yeah. So it's part of last year's. Okay, it's not a core. So that gives you a bit of background of how we build up our budgets and how we report to you for groups of activities. And what we do for groups of activities is we do a comparison against a pro rata. So it's a trend. Okay, so 4 months into the financial year, one could expect to be in and around 33%. And what we do on these reports is we indicate if we're not up to the 33%, and Manton goes and talks to the group managers and gets some reasons about why their expenditure and revenue trends are not up to the 33%, and there's very good reasons for that. If they're over it, he also comments. We've found in the past that that sort of pro rata comment has served us quite well. The year normally starts a bit slow on expenditure trends, to be fair, and towards the end it picks up as projects become completed and expenditure comes in. Revenue is normally even throughout the year, except for consents, which is invoiced at the end of the year. So that's a slight anomaly. But most of it is fairly even. So the trends during the financial year are expected to be in and around the pro rata. In this case, it's a 33% pro rata. This report, and Manton will get to it, but this report for regional income is pretty much bang on that trend. Groups of activities are a little bit slow, but not a lot slow. So with that,
just on that, so income's pretty easy to predict. I mean, as you say,
on a pro rata basis, it is.
It's easy.
Yeah.
It's a great little business, really.
It is
what's the
business.
fallout? What's the big fallout thing in terms of costs? So what is it? A disaster? Or
you mean if
the
we...
biggest impact on our costs is? Otherwise, operating's pretty easy to predict.
Well, you've got
bank bursting, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you've got $12 to $30 million worth of staff cost, and unless staff leave or we recruit more staff in the budget, then it's pretty even, to be fair. You've got external expenditures, which can cause the bumps. You've got a lot of you've got consultancy, you've got external contracts, and I think in areas like biosecurity and flood and drains, it's a slow pickup, and it depends on the seasons too. Quite often, the summer season, there's a lot more work done, and there's a lot more payments made. But to answer your question, is a major fallout? You're right. You'd need some sort of disaster, either that or poor financial management, which isn't the case here. I'd like to say.
So, for example, Councillor Graham, the willow sawfly pest a few years ago was something that obviously had quite a significant impact on our expenditure that hadn't been foreseen, until it arose. That kind of potential risk.
So how often do you have to show a red flag here? Like, on a year-to-year basis?
Yeah, not too often. We do a reforecasting in March, and normally that reforecasting is pretty much on track regional income unless something major happens on the sell down and realisations being a lot less or interest rates being a lot less than budgeted, then there isn't too much of a problem in regional income. So for expenditure, the red flag, I mean, the budget's so finely balanced that I'd be putting, in a reforecast, I'd be putting up a red flag for a couple of 100,000. But there's fluctuations, some up, some down, and I monitor that going through the year. I haven't covered it for this report. I think it's a little bit early, but certainly I know of some expenditures that have blown out to 100,000 or 200,000, 300,000, but I also know some favourables coming in for another couple of 100,000. So I've got them balanced. There's no overall red flag. But at the 9-month reforecasting, you get the whole story, the pluses and the minuses.
The other point to make, which took me a while to get my head around early stages, was sometimes you physically can't spend it because you can't get the expertise you need to do the job, certainly in the science realm, etc. So there's, the carryover stuff is something I always struggle with, and I just asked Mr. Drury a question. I mean, as a council, I'd like to think we could spend what we rate, and it's hard to have to every year to go into your carryover stuff. And can you give us a comment on that? Just
carryovers. Carryovers are one of two reasons. One is, and we all know this. I mean, one is you don't do a program and you don't want to lose your money and you carry it forward. And central government's been criticised for that, and I suppose some parts of local government are. And it can happen rather quick, like you haven't spent it, so carry it forward to make it available next year to do whatever you're going to do. We don't run it that way, I'd like to say. To get an item carried forward, we give you a fairly comprehensive write-up in June as to the reasons of an under-expenditure. And the reasons have got to be a section of work that you've wanted to do and you haven't been able to do it because of some reason. And certainly last year there was a lot of consultancy dollars and science carried forward because Ian and his team were tied up with the Ruatanifa studies. So a lot of the work they had programmed have now got to do this year. So he presented that to council and talked to that for about 20 minutes and got a fair portion of that carried forward. So hence it's so high last year, but it's certainly not an easy track to get money brought forward.